5:46, it's confession time exclusively on Greatest Hits Radio. If you miss one, of course, you can always go to the app.
Of course, and you can find Simon Mayo's Daily Confession podcast.
There you go, that's what you can do. Today's confession comes from John. And the correct answer is no forgiveness. Father Simon, I won't give an exact year to my confession as it will make it harder to trace me. But with your skills, you'll be able to work it out approximately. So I was at the University of Manchester and was lodging with a fellow student friend in his parents' house between Manchester and Bolton. We got ourselves a part-time job working in a restaurant in town run by a nice Italian guy called Luigi, who was probably from Oldham as his accent was only for the customers. We were not paid much, but it helped our social life funding. Now, working evenings... Lack of punctuation here from John.
Okay.
Working evenings in the restaurant, especially Friday and Saturday, got in the way of a healthy student life of drinking, girls, drinking, going to gigs and more drinking. Now, Barclay James Harvest, the greatest English band of all time, underplayed on the radio and underappreciated, were playing a gig one of the nights we were due to be working. We didn't want to miss this one, so we needed an excuse to not work that evening. I just passed my driving test and I bought an old Mini. This helped us get to and from university and work, obviously when not drinking. We couldn't both ring in sick at the same time as it would not look good. So we went into work, but by bus as we had plans to be drinking later, and had arranged for a female friend to ring the restaurant at a certain time and tell Luigi that Les's mother had an accident at work and was in hospital in Bolton and he should come quickly. Les is the friend, by the way.
Yes.
Now, Luigi was very caring about people and told Les that he ought to go now. Les asked if I could take him in the car as it would be quicker, and Luigi said, OK, as long as I came straight back. I agreed I'd come straight back, so we left and headed off to the pub to get prepared for the Barclay James Harvest gig. Now, obviously, I didn't intend to go back, so I chose a moment when it was too late to return to the restaurant. I made a call to Luigi and told her I was very sorry, but the Mini broke down on the way back, and I was waiting for someone to come and fix it. I didn't really want to leave the car as it was a bit of a rough area. Well, we just about got away with this, although I'm not sure Luigi fully trusted me. But he was very good with Les, asking how his mother was and how she was recovering from her nasty fall, which was a strange accident as she worked on the till at Quicksave. Anyway... Some weeks later, I was invited by my old schoolmates back in Stoke to go to a Sutherland Brothers gig in Stoke, and there was going to be a big party afterwards. Just to say, the Sutherland Brothers are Stoke and Scotland's greatest band, so much more than the Arms of Mary, and like Barclay James Harvest, underappreciated.
Yeah.
Now, Les wanted to go as well, so we needed another great excuse. A whole weekend was needed for this one. Now, at this point, I think you should probably ask Holly to leave the studio and put the kettle on, as she won't like what's coming. We had two plans. Plan A was quit the job and hope Luigi took us back in desperation the following week. Or Plan B, which is what we actually did as we needed the money. Plan B was that we knew someone who had access to a lab where they kept rats. So we got them to obtain some droppings for us for the cost of a pint or two. So I think it was Thursday evening after service at the restaurant. We helped with the cleaning and tidying up whilst Luigi counted the money. He always checked the place. He wanted it to be absolutely spick and span. But this time, as we were leaving, I said, I've forgotten my bag, and dashed back in. I deposited the rat droppings in the kitchen and a few in the seating area, and then came out with my bag and we all went home. Following morning, there were two anonymous phone calls to the council. One about maybe seeing a rat whilst they were eating, and another about a strange smell around the restaurant.
It's bad.
We turned up... Yes. We turned up for work on the Friday after hearing nothing and thought we'd better go with Plan A, but we were greeted by a distraught Luigi, telling us that inspectors had turned up and had closed him down. He was going to have to get the pest control people in, followed by a professional clean, but with the weekend it probably wouldn't be until next week. He was apologetic and said hopefully we'll be open sometime the following week. He looked gutted. We tried to look gutted and tried to sympathise with him. I think we put on a pretty good performance. We went back to the car and headed straight to my parents' home in Stoke. A weekend of drinking, the gig, a great party, and Mum's Sunday roast followed, and the Sutherland Brothers were rocking. The restaurant reopened the following week. We actually got away with it. Father Simon, I actually do feel very remorseful now. I don't expect forgiveness, maybe some understanding from Matt, who's a pushover.
Yeah.
Les tells me that Luigi has now passed away and gone through to the other side, so it should be safe to tell the story. Yours repentantly, John. Well, I mean, here's my guess, is because, we get used to understanding what the people's verdict is going to be. I don't think there's going to be a single person who's going to forgive John for this shocking crime, led astray by alcohol and rock and roll and closing Luigi's restaurant, which is a great restaurant. Everybody loved it, but now shut because of your selfishness and your alcohol addiction.
Wow.
Yes, Sister Holly.
Yeah, gosh, John, I don't know how you go out at that, just generally, frankly, because it's just awful, really, what you did. You took advantage of Luigi's really good nature. Yes. You started off small. I mean, I say small, it wasn't actually that small, of saying that Les's mother had fallen over or whatever, and he was so kind about it. And then you thought, let's take it one step further, getting rat droppings. That's disgusting. Why on earth were you grabbing those?
She needs this.
Just in your bag. Ugh. So you had those, you had them in your hand and put them on the floor, then you rung the council. Okay. It's just dire. No, not forgiven.
Calling the council.
Oh, superb.
Yeah, very good. Brother from another country.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, he's very remorseful. I mean, as far as, making up something about somebody having a fall, we've all done something like that to try and get out of an engagement. I know that I have. But as far as the I've never stooped to the rat droppings. Got to be honest, I'm struggling to find a reason. I tell you why we should forgive, because he's come clean, hasn't he? And he's clearly remorseful. So that should really be grounds for. And Barclay James Harvest, he's reaping what he's sowing there. Okay. So for that reason, there you go. That's the reason he's going to get forgiven.
Okay. All right. Well, the people's verdict, please, for John. 61054. First word is Simon. Just before the news, we had a confession from John, who loved the Sutherland brothers so much that he and his mates skived off their job at Luigi's restaurant by deliberately dropping rat poo, then phoning the council, getting the restaurant shut down so they didn't have to work. Then it opened again and they got away with it until now. The people's verdict, here we go.
Yes, basically everyone's saying not forgiven. Josh in Liverpool, totally not forgiving this one. The rat droppings, the ringing, the council. Neris in Watford, you haven't even finished reading it out. Absolutely not forgiven. Katie Tunstall from Pontefract, absolutely not forgiven on every level. I don't think John even deserves a smart speaker. But Jenny in Loughborough says John should be forgiven. He clearly feels remorseful. We all make mistakes when we're young. I agree with Matt. Leave it in the past.
That's the way you get yours read out, as if it contains the words, I agree with Matt, somewhere. Okay, your confession, please. 2. confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Whether you're forgiven or not, you get the smart speaker. It's 5:47. This is Greatest Hits Radio playing The Cure from 1992. And gather round because it is confession time. And if you miss any, of course, this is what you do about it.
You go to the Greatest Hits Radio app and you'll find Simon Mayo's Daily Confession podcast.
Everything is so easy from there. Today's confession comes from Common John. Thank you, Common John. Father Simon, tough cookie, Holly, and easy as you go, Matt.
Yep.
Back in the day, I was serving in the army. Normally, confessions start like that.
Never get on.
I should basically say this is not particularly good if you're eating or drinking. I was serving in the army in Germany during the Cold War. This is around 1988, so it's not that cold. It all eased off a bit by then, to be honest. Days of international tensions, Father Simon. Doctor Who on the TV and the Rolling Stones were back, rocking like they were teenagers. Different times, or maybe not. A day's demolition training was planned. Now, I'm afraid there are no further details about what demolition training was all about. I imagine it's blowing things up in a controlled way. A day's demolition training was planned, and on a very cold, early German winter's morning, we set off for the training area about 2 hours away. The troop leader, a cavalry officer of the Tim Nice but Dim type, sat up front in the warm cab of the truck with the driver, whilst the rest of us sat in the back of the truck in sub-zero temperatures. This man was, you might like to know, a hereditary peer of the realm, who would have fitted right in with the cast of Blackadder. Although actually he would probably have thought Hugh Laurie as Lieutenant the Honourable George Colterson Burley and Stephen Fry as General Sir Anthony Cecil Hogmanay Melchett a little bit common. You get the idea. We're going to call him Lord Johnny Jodhpurs. He had an estate somewhere and couldn't wait to get back to Nanny and his staff and the deer, or something like that.
Yeah.
You get the picture.
I do.
Needless to say, our leader got lost, and a 2-hour journey turned into a 5-hour journey. He might have been landed gentry, but he wasn't equipped with basic map reading skills. He probably left that to Nanny as well. We were freezing to death in the back of this truck, whilst Lord Lieutenant Johnny Jodhpurs sat in a warm cab up front, puffing on his aristocratic fags, Ome pink super slim cigarettes. I'll have you know. Never heard of them.
No.
A tea urn had been provided, but because it was from the cookhouse, it was virtually undrinkable due to them using condensed milk.
Ugh.
It was an unspeakable brew. Most of us, being experienced soldiers, had brought our own flasks. So as the cookhouse tea was going undrunk, I decided to use it to warm my feet up. Resourcefulness is praised in the army, Father Simon. Thinking on your feet. Well, that's what I was doing. I was thinking on my feet and thinking about my feet. Removing my boots and my sweaty socks, I placed both feet into the tea container and the warm fluid they called tea. The relief was instantaneous. With the feeling brought back to my feet, I replaced the lid. My athlete's foot, I have to say, was only mild at this time. It wasn't particularly unpleasant, although my eczema was
Right. Yeah, even
flaring
better.
up.
Yeah.
And also my toenails are a little bit gangrenous. Anyway, a short while later, the truck stopped and Tim Nice but Dim Lord Johnny Jodhpurs appeared at the tailgate to say he was absolutely parched. That'll be the heated cab and all the fags then. Is there any tea, Corporal? He inquired. Several looks flashed between the 12 of us in the back of the truck, which led me to say, Sir, I'll get you a cup. It's not very hot, but it's better than nothing. He was very pleased and smiled his aristocratic smile. I say, old fruit, thank you so much. We proceeded to watch him glug down a mugful. Tea, condensed milk, flaky skin, foot fungus. That's foot fungus and infected toenail.
Excellent.
I asked for forgiveness for giving him the tea that I had actually put my feet in, which is probably not a very good thing under the Geneva Convention. Common John's confession about a cup of tea that wasn't quite what old Johnny Jodhpurs was expecting. Stern-faced Holly.
No, not impressed with this one at all, to be completely honest. The fact, also
He's
as well,
probably a friend of yours.
yes, absolutely. Well, the thing is with John, I mean, he's a soldier, so frankly, you just need to toughen up a little bit, frankly, and not put your feet in the tea. The eczema, the fungal on the nail, and the athlete's foot. Ugh, so gross. Not impressed. Not forgiven.
Holly's speaking for the nation.
So good.
Matt speaks for the proletariat.
Yes, I mean, you know, am I alone in thinking that Lord Johnny Jodhpurs very much had this coming? No. Sitting up there in the front in your cab with your aristocratic cigarettes and your heating on full, and then thinking you can waltz back and speak to the masses with your tea. And obviously he doesn't have any taste either. Couldn't taste the desperate condensed milk and the fungus, so pretty much had it coming. Very much first up against the wall, Lord Johnny Jodhpurs. So for that reason, going to forgive.
Okay, it's the people's verdict. Please, do you forgive Common John? Yes or no? Give us your reasons. On the text, please, 61054, first word is Simon. The people's verdict is incoming. On the text, 61054, first word is Simon. Today's confession came from Common John, a story of army exercises in Germany on a cold winter's morning, where Common John decided to warm his feet in the tea urn with the tea, which was then later drunk by the aristocratic troop leader, Lord Johnny Jodhpurs. Anyway, the people's verdict is here. What do they say?
So everyone is forgiving tonight. Carl in Ashton, I'm completely forgiving John, and I've got a pot of tea on now if you fancy a cuppa. Andy the Royal Mail trucker says, totally forgive, he had it coming. Lol, from one ex-squaddy to another. Top job, fella. And finally, Ross says, we can't stand these stuck-up officers who look down on everyone. As is well known in the army, what's worse than an officer without a map? An officer with a map.
All right, very good. A map reading confessions out there.
Yes.
That's a very good idea. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. 14 to 6 word has got out about tomorrow's new listener day.
Oh, really?
Yep, and a lot of people getting very excited. They want to go early, and I said, we can't do that. It's definitely tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because we can't tell you anything else. But, just that's what we're expecting.
Yes.
Very good. So, shut up, Simon. Get
Shut
on.
up.
contracts. So today's confession comes from Danny. Thank you, Danny, for today's tale. Holly, Simon, Matt and the team. Holly leads the way.
Yeah, woo!
Purely on the basis that the ultimate victim in this case could still be around and listening to Greatest Hits Radio, I would like to remain anonymous, please. You'll realise later why. Also, not sure if it would be necessary, but a PG certificate, I think, because some people might find this rather traumatic. Let's call the person Danny, okay?
Let's.
Danny says, I was born and raised on a farm in South Africa and moved to the UK in 1998. In the 50s and 60s, my late dad would take the family every 2 to 3 years on a 10 or 11-hour drive down to the wild coast of South Africa for a 2 to 3 week holiday, a very beautiful, remote, wild and tranquil part of the country. Absolute heavenly holiday for us kids. I have 2 siblings. The cottage was so remote that there were no services such as electricity, running water, sewage facilities. The nearest neighbours were 3 other cottages, the nearest one about 250 yards away. So you get the picture.
Okay.
In this one particular year, my late Uncle H, my aunt and 3 cousins were on holiday at the same time. Uncle H was a very large man, really likeable, but a real prankster, and was also known for some magical tricks, like he'd make coins disappear and reappear behind your ears, or make fingers disappear. He was a real character. Everyone always loved real characters. However, there was a side to Uncle H that used to irritate people at times.
Imagine.
And that was, he was a bit of a braggart. He'd fought with a lion, he'd wrestled with a crocodile, he'd evaded a wounded buffalo, and was often chased by elephants. I'm sure you get the drift. He had so many stories. True. My siblings, cousins, and I decided we were going to teach Uncle H a lesson. So it happened that one day the adults went shopping, leaving my uncle to look after us kids. This was the chance of a lifetime. There were no toilet facilities in the cottage. However, there was a long drop. A big hole in the ground, surrounded by a wooden structure, hidden by bushes, about 20 yards away from the cottage. It's like a Wilbur Smith novel. I prepared myself for this prank by breaking a branch from a thorn tree and trimmed all the leaves off, just leaving a rather large thorn at the end of the stick. No. When Uncle H decided to use the toilet facilities later that afternoon, we were prepared. I crept very quietly up to the side of the wooden structure. I found a gap in the wooden slats. I put the stick through the gap and I jabbed my uncle in the buttocks. Now, my siblings and cousins tell me that they were sitting on the veranda when all hell broke loose. This wild, raging bull came charging out from behind the bushes, holding his trousers up and bellowing, "I've been bitten by a snake! Do something!" As fate would have it, 2 young ladies were walking past, and on hearing my uncle's bellows, went to offer some help. My uncle lay down on the grass on his stomach, screaming that he'd been bitten on the buttocks by a snake. He then told them that he had heard that the only way to help with a snake bite was to cut across the bitten area with a knife, a sharp knife, and then suck the poison out.
Ooh.
He grabbed his Swiss knife from his pocket, because we all carried those, and he begged them if they could do that rather urgently, please, because he didn't want to die there and then from a snake bite. Now, the one lady, as fate would have it, was a British medical student, and true to her nursing instincts to help this poor man, got down and proceeded to make a cut over the infected area and sucked and spat as hard as she could for what seemed like half an hour, with my uncle bellowing and wailing. Eventually, the kind lady stopped and said that she thought she must have been able to get the poison out, as she couldn't see a blue line tracking from the wound upwards or anything like that. The kind lady put a handkerchief over the wound and suggested that my uncle take a headache tablet and go and lie down. My uncle was very grateful for their help and bid them a very embarrassing farewell. Not soon after, the other adults came back from the shop, and Uncle H asked my dad if he could check that everything looked okay. My dad's first reaction was a panic. However, on seeing the wound, only 1 puncture hole as opposed to 2 for a snake, He immediately turned to me, being the eldest, and asked me if I knew anything about this. All I could do was to nod my head and expect the worst. However, my dad had to run out of the room and called after me. When I walked out, he had a huge grin on his face, but he did tell me off, saying it was not something that should be done again. But obviously he found it very, very funny. But I don't, says Danny, beg forgiveness for what we did to Uncle H, as in essence he was asking for it, and he did see the funny side once my dad had made us apologise. But I do seek forgiveness for what we put that poor innocent young British lady medical student through, who innocently saved a life and extracted poison from another human's buttocks. It would be interesting to know what sort of stories she tells back in the UK. Maybe she's listening. But sadly, there was nobody at the cottage the next day when we went to go and apologise at my mum's insistence. I should tell you that my mum didn't find it funny at all. So... well, it's a story involving snakes, and I don't even know. Is that true about sucking the venom out of a...
Yeah.
Is it?
Does that work?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
How do you know?
I've done it many times.
Okay. Anyway, Sister Holly, what do you say to Danny?
Well, it's difficult to know where to start, to be honest. It really, the trauma of his uncle thinking he'd been bitten by a snake, then running out, then the British medical nurse. I mean, the whole thing just seems very traumatic, very extreme. I know he was a prankster, but I really, really do feel like this went too far.
Yes.
The little stick was maybe a little bit of a laugh at the start, but he should have come forward and said, no, it wasn't a snake. Look, it was me. He should have come forward, and that's why I'm not forgiving Danny.
Brother from another guy.
I mean, let's be honest, that prank could not have gone better. I mean, first of all, I would argue if you're going to do the thorn against the buttocks prank, you need to make sure you get the timing right, given what's happening there. But then him coming out, it's like a carry-on movie comes out, and you got two nursing students. Matron, someone's going to need to... suck this venom out. My goodness me. My instinct is that the nursing student would have been very happy never to find out that it wasn't in fact a venom that she was sucking out. So I am going to forgive.
Okay. Well, so it's all gone according to plan in the studio here. People's verdict, please, on Danny's confession and about his poor uncle. On the text, please, 61054. First word is Simon. Okay, so today's confession, just before the news, came from Danny, a tale from the remote South African bushlands when he jabbed his uncle in the buttocks with a specially constructed stick with a thorn on the end. And his uncle was in the outdoor loo. Anyway, he thought he'd been bitten by a snake, and a passing nurse had to remove some non-existent venom. With much hilarity, is Danny forgiven? Let's check out with the people's verdict.
Everyone's forgiving tonight. Elaine, definitely forgiven. If his dad and uncle found it funny, good for them. The medical student probably went back to uni and lived off tales about how she'd saved someone's life. Crispin from Guildford says, forgiven. I had to pull over, crying with laughter at the shenanigans. Matt got it right. It was like a carry-on movie. Forgiven. And James says, forgiven. Surely the nurse should have noticed that there was only one puncture wound.
Yes, I suppose that's also true.
It is.
If you were going to cast that, I would say the uncle would be Bernard Breslaw.
Quite right.
And Hattie Jakes would just be the passing nurse.
Definitely.
Anyway, so if you have a confession, we would love to see it. And then if we use it, you get a smart speaker. Danny, not his real name, gets today's confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. However, first of all... beautiful Albinoni's Adagio letting us know one more time that it's confession time, last of the week. Smart speaker heading towards the guy who sent this one in is Joel from Showbiz North London.
Oh, Joel,
Ooh.
right.
Okay. Yeah. Here's my prediction. Matt will forgive
Obs.
after the opening sentence.
Okay.
The greeting.
Okay.
Dear Andrew Eldritch and the Sisters of Mercy.
Oh, boom. Well done.
They were a band back in the 80s.
Oh, fab.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I write to seek absolution for a crime committed against art, good taste, and all of those creative souls who endeavour to bring a little more substance to our lives through making paintings. Never mind your Tracy Emin's and your Damien Hirsts or your Francis Bacon's. Art lovers, prepare to have your creative mindset truly tested. In the mid-90s, I was in attendance at a university in the northeast of the country, studying for a BA Honours degree in fine art. I found myself on the first day of year 2 introduced to the spacious Year 2 Studios. An A4 piece of paper had appeared on the door. It said this: all Year 2s must meet at the Coach Park at 2 p.m. for a trip to the 5 castles of Northumberland. Paintings will be shown in the main foyer gallery, and the best paintings will be selected to hang in the offices of, let's call them, Jones and Jones. £200 will be paid for each selected painting.
Wow.
This was clearly an opportunity, not just to earn 200 quid, which would serve to augment my student lifestyle with a few luxuries, but also a real coup. Selling a painting at this early stage in my career would be a reputational boost, as well as the knowledge that such an auspicious company owned my work. I say auspicious, I wanted to sell work to rich people.
Yes.
Off we went, and there were 5 choices: Lindisfarne, Bamburgh, Alnwick, Warkworth, I hope I've got that right, and Dunstanburgh.
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah.
Now, this is where I might lose some of you. I had become, remember, he's an art student. I'd become convinced in year 1 that anything I painted should include striking vertical lines, whether there were any or not, in the composition of my painting. Loading up a decorator's brush with an almost straight arm, I would aggressively lunge at the picture, letting the paint simply land where it did, in a quite deliberate disruption of the painted castle underneath.
Goodness
This,
me.
in my view, would add tension, conflict and drama to the work. As I walked from the picturesque village of Craster towards the looming ruins of Dunstanburgh, I saw a great opportunity to deploy this unique and personal motif in the painting. A week passed and the day of the castle show arrived in the main foyer gallery at the university. In the presence of besuited top brass from Jones and Jones, we mingled awkwardly, shuffling away from the prospect of having to defend our work from these potential patrons. Eyebrows were certainly raised at my efforts, however. It was tricky to tell whether this was in horror or appreciation. Sad to say, my painting was not chosen. With a heavy heart, I returned to the studio and made myself busy thinking about how to deploy the next version of my slash and purposeful black brush marks on a canvas, which I know Matt will like so much. On the following Wednesday, a week after the show, the faculty dean appeared at my studio space and announced that the offices of Jones and Jones had reconsidered, and my painting had been selected after all. I was delighted and helped the department technicians wrap my precious artwork and ship it off the same day. On Thursday, the dean appears again and says there's a phone call. On the end of the phone line, a nice lady who described herself as the Chief Marketing Officer for Jones and Jones. They were delighted to have received my painting and looked forward to hanging it in the office, but sadly, it appeared to have been damaged in transit. Because the surface of the painting had obviously lent against something in the van, and some violent black marks had been left over the castle. If I would just give up an afternoon to restore the painting to its rightful status as a lovely image of a castle, they would happily pay for a taxi and give me a nice lunch. Well, I suspected even at this stage that my artistic integrity might be in a precarious position. I arrived at Jones & Jones with my oils, box of brushes and other necessary tools to complete the work. "We're so sorry," said the Chief Marketing Officer. "We love the painting so much, but obviously it's had a terrible time in the van. Look at those great ugly black marks. Aren't they horrible? Can you paint them out?" I looked closely at my painting. Just as I suspected, before me stood my version of Dunstanburgh Castle, complete with my hallmark, vertically applied brush marks over the main castle motif. There was absolutely no mistaking the fact that these were deliberate, my signature painted slashes. Here was my chance. This is my style. I cannot reverse a truly creative process. These marks are meaningful. Just look at the energy. Stuff your 200 quid. You'll live to regret this. The future of my work hung precariously like a mouse in the mouth of a cat. "Okay, I'll add a bit more sky," I said.
Bet you did.
Reached down to open my materials case, mixing up a nice soft blue tone to match that of the foreground. I remained at the castle with brushes for the next hour and a half, deleting characterful painted marks in favour of lovely pictures of a castle with added clouds. I even added a little bird in one corner for good pleasure. As far as I'm aware, the painting still hangs in the offices of Jones & Jones. I can't remember what I spent the 200 quid on. Obviously, I have to seek forgiveness not from Jones & Jones. They clearly lack the taste and sophistication to know real expression when they see it, or from my tutors and peers on the course at the university, who were largely inebriated during the whole affair. But from the art-appreciating public, a few of whom might have enjoyed the more adventurous version of my painted castle if I had persisted with the style. For the record, I qualified as an art teacher in early 2000 and since then enjoyed a successful career teaching others to paint in a range of inventive ways, so all was not completely lost. And I certainly got £200 and lost all my credibility. Matt always loves confessions which come from the artistic community.
Yeah.
We'll get to him in a moment. Sister Holly first.
Yeah, I just think, Joel, your attitude really sucks, to be honest. Frankly, all of this I thought was really character building. You know, you did this painting, they didn't really like it, but, you know, every artist, when they're starting out, you know, does jobs that perhaps aren't authentically themselves. You know, every artist does that. And so I felt like, you know, this was just a really character building experience, and you were taking it as, oh, they didn't appreciate my art, which I just thought was really arrogant. So for that reason, I'm not forgiving.
Brother, but art loving.
Oh, so many of those things I agree with. Art and art students and artists. Where do I begin? This story confirms every prejudice I've had about you lot from the start. Are you prepared to compromise your integrity, or do you want 200 quid? I'll have the 200 quid, please, and have some more sky and some birds. Oh, yes, this speaks volumes. I'm probably going to forgive just because of the Sisters of Mercy reference at the start. But the fact that he's ended up being an art teacher himself, so he's started the whole vicious circle all over again. Indeed, starting this corrosion all over again. And there you go, Sisters of Mercy reference, and that's why I'm going to forgive.
People's verdict, please. Do you forgive our young art student, now art teacher? 61054 on the text, please. First word is Simon. People's verdict, 61054. First word is Simon. Thank you. But anyway, he sold it to a very nice company, and the people's verdict is in. Here it comes.
So Neil in Scarborough says, absolutely forgiven. If thinking on your feet were an art form, Joel would be the new Picasso. Catherine in Newcastle says, not forgiven, though. He cost one of his fellow students the chance to have their work featured. Not good at all. But Katie in Tunbridge Wells says, definitely forgiven. It was Jones and Jones's fault for not appreciating true art. Hope you enjoyed the well-earned £200. I'm guessing you did, as you can't remember what you spent it on.
And that painting may well still be hanging up in the aforementioned company's art room. If you have a confession, please send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.